Just waiting for the PowerPoint to start. So I wanted to share that video with you just to give an example on how we as a European organization try to summarize in an understandable way about the benefits of the use of dynamic solar shading. So messages like this, we work consistently on trying to spread on social media and educational programs, etc. So I got some help from the Greek organizers here to translate my punchline for the past 15 years, that the best kilowatt hour is always the one we don't need. And we've heard about it from your minister and the previous speaker as well. Oh, that's the movie. Here we go. And we will look at it a bit closer. Before I start, just a quick word. Who am I to be invited here to speak with you today? A fantastic audience, by the way, so I really commend the Hellenic organization to pull this together. I'm really impressed. I started in the solar shading industry in 1993 as a sales rep for Hunter Douglas. I started buying controls from Somfy a few years later in the project business. I moved to Somfy in 2000, and from 2014 and onwards, I have had a fantastic opportunity to travel around the world within the Somfy organization to meet with architects, specifiers, consultants, and trade people, and I learned a lot from that. Really interesting. So when I finally retired in 2022 from Somfy, I initiated Shade Academy, which is a small one-man operation where I offer training programs for architects, consultants, or also for solar shading people, if requested. I call it Shade Academy. Since 2006, I've been actively a part of the European organization. And since 5 years now, I'm the elected president, at least for one more year, 2025. Then we see after that if they think I'm still young and alive enough. I'm becoming a grumpy old man, maybe. But I would like to stay, because what's happening now around us is something I've been fighting for the past 15 years. And you saw the movie. The opportunity for our industry is now, really. And I would like to see where this takes us. And as a crowning of the whole thing for our industry, I got us approved as members of the United Nations as an industry a year and a half ago. And that took dynamic solar shading to COP28 for the first time. So, and I can share with you that the Global ABC, the building section within United Nations, they right away embraced the use of dynamic shading as a passive solution and have included it in their communication already now. Yes, we are a European organization, of which the Hellenic organization is one of the younger members, just less than 2 years, right? We have still UK on board. We kept them after Brexit. But I would say during this year, something is happening, because we have now cooperation with companies or organizations in a large number of countries around the world. And again, this work with the United Nations Global Alliance, we are part of in their global projects. And of course, I hope that most of you are aware of the Global Shading Day activity, which is expanding this year. So if you have a Greek operation here and you have export and you are active in other markets outside of Europe, you will be more than welcome to use the Global Shading Day material also in those countries. So we say maybe in 2026, it will be really a global shading day. And I listened to your deputy minister. She said the importance for us as an industry to bring the awareness to the public. We also hear a lot about these challenges that we have, about sustainability. We need to save energy. We have heat problems, floodings, and then we have all these new regulations coming from the EU Commission. Very exhausting very often for companies of our industry. Because even if we think we have big companies, compared to other industries, we are kind of a small to maybe medium-sized kind of industry. And it's very hard to work on all these things. And we hear about the green reset and everything. But I think that here is a common denominator, which is the lack of electricity for all these green resets and everything. And here we can play a vitally important role. Just to share with you that International Energy Agency, of which Greece is also a member, in a report a few years ago, they guesstimate that the energy use just for air conditioning alone will go up globally 4 times. In Europe, we talk about a doubling or a tripling of energy use, driven by air conditioning. This is another report I like a lot, because this is looking back in time on actual facts from the European Environment Agency, where they see that in Europe we already use more than 200% more energy for cooling residential homes and buildings. It's a lot. We take just a quick jump over to New Delhi in India on just one slide, and there is a reason, and I will tell you why. We hear people talking about terawatts and megawatts and all these things, right? And we have difficulty as humans to relate to how much is it. And I discussed this with the sustainability guy in New Delhi in 2016. And when I came back in 2017, he showed me and said, I've done the calculation. 1 square meter of a window in New Delhi. And you might say, oh, that's India. We are in Greece. Well, I would argue it might be a bit less, but not much less, for sure, because the sun in Greece is lower than in India, right? So 1 square meter of a window in New Delhi is exposed to the same amount of energy during 1 year that you would need to make 40,000 cups of coffee or boiling 30,000 eggs. And all of a sudden, I think you can see yourself maybe in the kitchen with your wife or husband, and you have 30,000 eggs for breakfast. And that's 1 square meter. And then we need machinery to take all that energy out of the building again so we can still live in the house. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? This is where we come in. So, with the limited amount of time I have today, because I'm quite passionate about these things, I could talk for like 6 hours. I won't do that. I've cherry-picked a few things. Free gin and tonics tonight, by the way. I've cherry-picked a few studies that we have conducted in ESSO during past times, because when we have people like your deputy minister here, it's important that we can prove and substantiate what we say. We can make claims, but we also need to show for it. So a couple of years ago, ESSO, we decided, with our tight and small budget, but with a fantastic support from the European industry, we managed to get some 120,000 euros together, and we went to Guidehouse, an outside our industry consultancy firm recognized by the EU Commission. Why did we go to them? First of all, I just said it, they are recognized by the Commission. They do work for insulation, for the oil industry, for all kinds of glass industry, etc. So they are unbiased. That's one thing. And the other thing is they hold the building statistics of Europe. So they know how many schools do we have in Europe, how many hospitals do we have. And now we say, let's put some thinking on top of that, statistics, and see what that means. And the reason for doing this again is that the awareness around how shading, dynamic shading, can act as the skin of our buildings. And also that we want to reach. We failed in the latest update of the European Building Directive, but we keep on trying to get solar shading recognized as a technical building system, like glass, like HVAC, like ventilation, like light, etc. We failed very much due to the crisis with Russia-Ukraine. There wasn't time, etc., but we will come back in the next couple of years. So to become a technical building system. Now, we said business as usual, which means you look at shading developing just as we do today. There is no addition. But the preferred scenario would be that we get some recognition in building regulations, maybe some financial subsidies from government, but that was not the case. The recognition was the important part. And that we move away from manual shading, failing to deliver a lot of the benefits, towards automated shading, and we put a very conservative increase on top. And here are the results from the jury. It stopped working, I'm sorry. Can you help me to, there we go, thank you. So, share of buildings in Europe in need of air conditioning. And what you should be aware of now, looking at this, is that this is all Europe. I come from Sweden, up in the north, when we have minus degrees and snow already now, right? And we are now in Greece. So this is the average we look at. Many of these figures become more significant when we look at Greece specifically. But it's still really interesting, because we do nothing, the red line increase of air conditioning will just continue. But if we use shading, we can interrupt the increase of new installations of air conditioning completely in Europe. And as a consequence of that, we are avoiding to consume all that energy, and that looks like this. And this is final energy, which means the energy that you and I pay for every month to the power company. And it would run down to around 60% in energy savings on direct electricity use. And this is a bit complicated, but I will take you through step by step. Here they were looking at the capital investment and the operative expenses, if we do this preferred. So we said we need more shading, which means we need to spend something and buy more. And that's the capex going up on shading. That costs money. But we avoid on air conditioning. And then they look at the final one, which is the OPEX, the operative expenses, during the lifespan of, let's say, 20 years on these machines. And that would also generate a saving. Now that adds up, and I heard your deputy minister, she did her homework and she read the papers because she quoted this presentation or this information. It means that private consumers and companies would save 285 billion euros accumulated until 2050 if we started this process today. A lot of money we can do other things with, right? And I started thinking around this. I said, this is a lot of money, 14.5 billion per year. Who is really the gaining? And I said some of it, and of course, it's worth celebrating because it's us, the owners, the tenants. But it's also, as a consequence, a positive win for the Greek government, because you require less energy to be delivered to you, which is then connected to how is energy produced, which is then connected to what about the CO2 emissions, etc., right? And in the end, of course, we do Mother Earth a big favor, because we become more sustainable and more responsible about how we use our resources. Whoops, here we go. It's playing funny with me. I'm sorry about that. It's not me. I need to go back. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Another one, just a snapshot. And this was already back in 2013. An Austrian outside blinds in aluminum are very common in Austria and Switzerland. And they got the question that, oh, but if you use aluminum, you will use a lot of energy, etc., and it will emit carbon dioxide. Well, yes, by doing a standard size blind, you emit 150 kilos of CO2. But then it stays on that building and operates during 20 years. It will save and avoid 8.5 tons of CO2. I call that the parasite consumption. So we need to waste some to gain a lot more. An important insight. Another snapshot, 2016, an old factory in London were to be refurbished to small apartments, small luxury condominiums. They came back from summer holiday in September to start to sell these apartments. And it turned out when they opened up, it was 47.5 degrees inside. That got connected via the British organization to South Bank University, and they did a live study here with live measurements during 2 months. And we showed that internal shading could bring that down, you can see here, 18 to 13 degrees. External shading could do a bit more, from 12 to 18 degrees. Not enough to get that apartment to a livable level, but the rest they could tweak on the ventilation, etc. So they managed to sell the apartments after all, thanks to the shading being adopted. It was completely neglected before. I heard my previous colleague here talking about north of Greece and also the colder climate you have in this country. And I always advocated that solar shading is not only about the summer, it's also about the colder period. And now we are proving that. This is actually in process as we speak, with a close cooperation with Saint-Gobain, one of the biggest glass manufacturers we have in the world. You see the climate box up there on the picture? So typical British building inside a building. So in June, July, it can be minus 12 degrees and be snowing in there. And they do live measurements using different kinds of shading. And in the yellow bracket at the far right, you see now the initial potential savings or improvements of the U value during cold periods, which then relates to the heating cost of that building. It's significant. I promise you, the savings we see from our products, other industries envy us for these levels of potential. Then we have a new ISO standard.
Mr. Hall, excuse me. Maybe we need to speed up just a little bit.
Okay, right? I was following the clock, saying 7 minutes.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I know.
I'll do my best. Yeah, we have a new ISO standard coming up, a massive work that we've done. An ISO standard that stipulates how building developers and consultants should calculate the use of different technologies, but solar shading in this case, in a building. And one of the climatic zones chosen here was Greece. And what you see in the green bracket over there is the potential energy cut being proven again that we heard already. And this will now become an ISO standard. So that will help us to drive the knowledge through with the consultants as well. Solar shading in the specification process. With new buildings, very often glass is obviously chosen very early to build a tight house. And solar shading is always, very often, not always, but very often chosen very late, when the budget is more or less non-existent. What I say, and the cost is put on the tenant, and it's more or less an added unforeseen cost. It becomes kind of a cheap solution. Price is the main driver, etc. And this is when you get buildings looking like this. These are my own pictures, just a few of them. I have loads of them. Terrible buildings. I say instead, put shading and glass together as a package and think about the performance of the two components, because we belong together in that weak part of the facade. in a joint specification, and then we can secure the budget in the building process, and we can discuss function, performance, and quality instead, and price becomes less of a leading point, a good enabler for our industry. And then we get buildings looking like this instead. The bottom left one is actually where my colleague from Sweden here today, Max Tillberg, he was a consultant, and I supplied the control system to this house in 2013. It's one of the most energy efficient office buildings in Sweden still today. So, final slide. I'm totally convinced, coming from this sector, very close to the building sector, etc., that we can solve everything by cooperating and talking to each other, because cooperation means working together, not working at the same time, which is still being done a lot in the building sector. And of course, we would welcome the support of local regulations. And I say a target for you should be to get your deputy minister to influence your regulation, at least to say that solar shading needs to be considered to give a building permit when you dimension the ventilation and the air conditioning. So they are specified as a combination. It will save her a lot, and it will be a fantastic business opportunity for you. Thank you.